monsoon season, this season of despair, we have seen how the mighty mountains, the Himalayas, have crumbled. We have seen how extreme rainfall has made sure that infrastructure has been destroyed, virtually destroyed in these vulnerable areas. How life has been lost, how property has been lost. I spoke about this last time. I spoke about the links to climate change last time. This time, I want to talk about, so what do we do? What does adaptation mean for regions like the Himalayas, which are so vulnerable and so ecologically fragile? I'm Sunita Narain, and I want to talk about how we cannot build in the Himalayas as if they were a colony of South Delhi. So what do we do? Firstly, let us understand that this is not going to change. We are going to see more and more the revenge of nature as we saw this year. That's the first thing, because if we accept that, then we will start understanding that we need to do development differently. We know that there is a link between the extreme rain, the cloudbursts that we have seen in this year, to climate change. We know it is about the western disturbance and how that is being impacted more and more by the weakening of the jet streams in the Arctic and the entire, what you call the oceans of wind that flow across the planet. This is climate change. And we also know that we humans, and particularly the richer parts of the world, are doing nothing to reduce the emissions that force temperatures to rise. And as a result of it, we will see more impact. So let's get this clear. This season of despair that we saw this year is not normal, but it is also not going to go away, which means that each year the impacts will become worse in some region or the other. And this is why it is important for us to be very clear that we need development, but we need to do development differently, particularly in the Himalayas, the most fragile slopes that we know that we are inhabiting today. We cannot build there as we were building in Greater Kailash, a colony of South Delhi. We just cannot. So this really is the question today. So what do? We need development, as I keep saying, because it is not as if these regions do not have people. They have livelihoods to be secured. They need an economic growth strategy, but this economic growth strategy needs to be done differently. So they do need infrastructure. They need hydropower, roads, and construction. But all this must be planned, keeping in mind the ecological fragility of the region. But secondly, and this is the toughest issue, this growth needs to understand that there will be limits. When I say limits, it means that there is a carrying capacity, and in these ecologically fragile areas, we need to understand that that carrying capacity needs to be understood and it has to be planned for. And then that planning has to be enforced. Just think very simply of hill towns like Shimla or Mussoorie or Kasauli or any one of those beautiful hill towns that we who live in the plains want to go to during our summer periods. People live there. And what data tells us is that urban growth in the Himalayas is exploding as people move from rural to urban. And I'm not even talking about the seasonal influx of tourism that happens in these regions. I'm talking about the sheer growth that is happening and how unplanned and how unmanaged it is. You will be amazed to know that there is not a single master plan in force in any of the these most vulnerable cities that exist in the Himalayas. And we know this master plan has to be designed keeping in mind which areas can you develop, which areas can you not develop, the no-go areas. And those have then to be enforced. You know that you have steep slopes and you cannot allow buildings to happen there. We know that today we are building on river beds, and that is leading to the kind of devastation that we are seeing. So we need to make sure that there is planning, and the planning is built on the fact that there are limits to growth. Now, this is a tough one because when we design limits, it has to be done in a way that it is designed for all, not just the rich, but also the poor. But it can best be done by making sure that we do planning where development is allowed and where development is not allowed. And this really requires that enforcement of building codes or water and sewerage systems that are made for this region. This is critical. But the next is also that it has to be designed for this seasonal influx of tourism that happens. We know that that is part of the economy of these regions. This is where tourism brings money and livelihood benefits as well. But unplanned, unmanaged tourism is today becoming a huge point of disaster for the Himalayas. They're becoming overcrowded, they're becoming dirty, they're becoming polluted, and more than that, development is happening without any building codes exactly where it must not happen. The kind of development that is happening rather than traditional buildings which planned for the region, you're today seeing an image of the Himalayas as if it was the plains of Uttar Pradesh, of Delhi, of the city of Gurugram. That's our vision of the Himalayas. Clearly, this cannot happen. But this also means that we need to make people partners in this new development strategy so that they understand that this is being done for them. That if there are limits on tourism, if there are checks on where you can build and where you can't build, on how much you can build, that it is done with transparency, it is done with openness, and it is done in a way that people have trust in the system, that this system is designed to make sure that it works for the Himalayas and so for them. But the other point is that if there are limits to this growth, and if, as I'm saying, there will have to be limits, you will have to decide on the numbers, the carrying capacity, the cumulative impact of the projects, and therefore plan for it. Then the most important thing is that this growth will have to be done differently. We need to make sure that we have high value growth in these regions so that there is economic growth, but that it is not out of low value, resource intensive activities, but it is built on the incredible wealth of this region, this biodiversity of the region, which brings us the medicinal plants, which brings us the incredible forested wealth, which brings us orchids and plant species which are so nutritive, so healthy, that we know that this is food as medicine. So how do we make sure that this wealth of this region, this natural resource wealth of this region is turned into a profitable business, which is done in the region so that money is kept where it is most needed? It's not as if this is new, what I'm saying. There has always been a talk about an orchid business in Sikkim. There has been talk about the apple business in Himachal. There is huge talk about Uttarakhand becoming the medicinal capital, medicinal herb capital of the country. But we don't see these plans through. We don't see the big picture, that this is really where we need to invest, and we need to do this in a way that that high value production is possible, because these lands cannot support production which is low in value, which means that you are intensively using your natural resource. You need to use less to get much more. Now, this is really where we need to understand this new development strategy. Today, this region is making hydroelectric plants back to back. Now, we need electricity. Hydroelectricity is critical from this region. It's a wealth of this region, an economic wealth of this region, because water is its most important resource, raw material, which generates electricity. But we are making those projects with such arrogance of an engineering mindset, so that it leads to more destruction. Now, if you were to redesign those projects so that you planned for the river and the flow in the river, and you planned along with nature, not against nature, you would reduce the number of projects. You would still get hydroelectricity or clean energy. But most importantly, the first job should be to make sure that that clean energy reaches the homes of people who live in this area, so that they can make sure their livelihood is secured. They can invest in what I call this high value, natural resource based business. So green livelihoods are then secured. This is really what, in my view, we need to start talking as an adaptation plan. Today, there's a lot of talk about national adaptation plan, global adaptation plan. It becomes a new science almost. People talk about it as if adaptation is something that we're going to do differently, as something we're going to learn about. Fact is, adaptation is about development. Adaptation is about development that puts people at the center of development, which recognizes the ecological fragility of a region. Planning is done based on the ecosystem, and it recognizes the fact that we need to make sure development works for people, and so it will also work for the planet. This is what adaptation means. And in the season of despair that we have seen, we need to make sure that we learn this lesson and we practice it fast.